Well, really excited today to be talking to Dr. Brent Ridge. Um, we've known each other now for 2 years. He reached out to KindWorks almost exactly 2 years ago when they were going through some changes with Beekman and have been amazing to be able to call him a mentor and a friend and just an amazing inspiration. Um, for those of you who don't know Dr. Brent Ridge as much, he is the co-founder of Beekman 1802 with his partner, business partner, and life partner, Josh Kilmer Purcell. They're also the co-authors of this amazing book. Many of you, I think, purchased, and he'll be available to sign them after, which will go through a lot of the great learnings and stories. I say, like, one of my favorite things about the book is the stories in there. Dr. Brent, I'm just going to call you Brent. Is that okay?
Totally fine.
Okay. Started his career as a physician at Mount Sinai. He then went on to launch the health and wellness division at the Martha Stewart Networks. He started Beekman 1802 in 2008. Really, I think out of necessity. They had bought an amazing farm in Sharon Springs, and recession happened, and they had goats, and they had Farmer John, and it's an amazing story you can share a little bit more about. What he always says is there are two main ingredients are goat milk and kindness, which is the reason that he reached out to KindWorks. And I love about the book is how he talks about scaling neighbor by neighbor by neighbor, not just in customers, but in employees. So we'll talk about both and how you build culture, not just within the company, but externally too, with everyone you meet. Today, they have over 130 employees across the country. They're launching in Mexico City. They're now global. And it's been named one of the most successful lifestyle brands in the US by NASDAQ, Inc., and Wall Street Journal. Besides that, Josh and Brent won Amazing Race, which is a really fun story. They also were starring in the fabulous Beekman Boys. They were the first gay couple to star on their own TV series in a national network. Really put them and Sharon Springs, I think, on the map during that time.
Mhm.
And QVC stars, I think they not only are stars, but they rewrote how to do sales on QVC, which is really exciting. So really excited to have you here to talk through your experience. Let's start with this is building for greatness and how culture rolls in. Just can you talk a little bit about why you wrote the book? Why culture? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we wrote this book now being 16 years into the company. And there were a couple of reasons. First, we thought, oh, the time period that we're in now is eerily similar to the time period in which we started our company. We started our company in the Great Recession of 2008 after we had both lost our jobs. So there was that economic upheaval. There was geopolitical upheaval, as there always seems to be. And there was a technological upheaval because that was really at the beginning of Web 2.0. And if you look at what period we're in now, we have all of those same factors now. The technology upheaval happens to be AI. And there's a big transition happening in the workforce. And we said, oh, well, why don't we take all of the things that we learned from growing our business in those same circumstances and put them in the book? We really wanted to focus the book on people who have the desire to start what we call Main Street businesses that would contribute back to their communities. Because I think so often the examples that you get of success these days are almost always a tech billionaire or an influencer flying in a private jet or something like that. And we said we just want to have examples of other people who are just making a really great living doing things that they love doing that contributes back to their community. And of course, we thought, oh, well, anybody buy this sort of book? Does it have legitimacy? Because often the books that get written by businesses are tech billionaires or something like that. And so we approached Harvard Business Review to say, oh, do you think that there is something to this book? And they're like, absolutely, because as we all know, small businesses are the backbone of the American economy. And they said this is exactly the type of book that we need to be printing. So that's how the book came about. Selfishly, 16 years into our company, and hopefully, we started from the beginning thinking we were going to build a legacy company that would outlive the two of us. And, we're getting preciously close to that period where we may no longer be so actively involved in the company. And we wanted to have one final document that put down the history of what we had done at Beekman 1802 so that no future leader in the company could ever question what was the ethos of the company and why, what was it that made this company great.
Amazing. Um, and I also realized I missed to say Laura is unfortunately not able to be
Right.
here
Oh, yeah.
today. She tested positive for COVID and is not feeling well. So wish her health. And we're going to take questions at the end, but please, if you have any, jump in
Oh,
anytime.
yeah, I love questions more than
Yes,
anything.
this is very
At
interactive.
at this point
Absolutely.
in the book tour, I've talked about myself so much, I really love questions.
Well, okay. So you said there's so many similarities between today and 2008 when you started.
Mhm.
Your business has obviously changed dramatically during that time.
Yeah.
What is the same and what's different in the way you run your business?
Oh, well, you know what? Let me elaborate some on the backstory for those who are less familiar. So, as Nicole said, I was a physician in academic medicine. My specialty was in longevity and aging. I was at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City, and after doing that for several years, I decided I wanted to go back to business school, and I went to Stern at NYU. And after business school, I thought I would go into biotechnology, but I got roped back to Mount Sinai because they had had a long-standing project idea to create a new center for the study of aging. And so I went back and said, "Okay, I'll do that." And I took a position that was 60% clinical and 40% working on this project, trying to get this project off the ground. And I elaborate on this story in the book. Um, but I said, "Okay, we want to create this center. There are plenty of people in New York City who would like their name on a building at Mount Sinai Hospital. Um, so what I need first is a beautiful design for this building so that they can envision their name on the side of the building." And so I made a short list of all of the star architects that I could think of at the time. And on my list, one of the architects on my list was I.M. Pei. And at the time, I.M. Pei was around 80 years old. He was still very active. And I wrote out like 10 letters, but I came out of the examining room from a patient one day, and my secretary said, "There's a Mr. Pei on the phone to talk to you." And I had told him in the letter that it was very important that in every aspect of creating this center that we demonstrate that just because you're getting older doesn't mean that you're not productive and you can't contribute. So even talking about culture at that time, right? You have to live the culture that you're creating. And he loved that idea. And he said, my son has just designed the big medical center at UCSS, so he has a lot of strength in this area. I want to work on this project with him. And so they came up with this beautiful design for this facility. And then I did the exact same thing. I said, okay, who are the people that I could ask who would have the resources to fund this, but also could represent um, being maximally productive as you get older? And there were maybe 3 or 4 people on that list. And one of them was Martha. I had no connection with Martha at the time. And while I was putting together kind of this idea and this approach, New York, she had just gone to Alderson, the prison where she went to. And New York Magazine had run basically a satire piece talking about what Martha's life was going to be like in Alderson. And at the end of it, they had actually put, "Oh, if you want to send Martha a letter, here's the address to Alderson and here's her prisoner number." And so I had written I wrote this big business proposal because, when you first get out of business school, you're like, I can write a good business proposal. And so I'd written this big business proposal and I said, listen, you rose to prominence when the baby boomers were in their nesting phase, when creating the perfect home was the paramount thing in their lives. And I said, as the baby boomers get older, how to get the most out of their life and be maximally productive as they get older is going to be paramount in their lives. And I said, you could be the perfect person for that. So thought, okay, how can I make sure of the thousands of pieces of mail she's likely to get? How can this stand out? So I went down to our radiology department at Mount Sinai. I got one of those big X-ray envelopes. They're about this big. and it said Mount Sinai Hospital across it. And I said, for sure, she's going to open this. And so I stuck my business proposal in there, mailed it off to her. And then 3 weeks later, I got an email from her assistant. And her assistant said, Martha would like to talk to you. And so about 2 weeks after she got out of, I got out of Austin, I went to visit her and she said, I want to do this. And so she funded what would become the Martha Stewart Center for Living at Mount Sinai, which was, I don't know if it still is, the largest center for the study and care of older patients in America. And during the process of opening that up, she said, I want to create a new division in my company devoted to health and wellness, and I want you to head it. And so that's how I got to Martha Stewart. So I joined that company in 2006. And at the time, my partner was in advertising, and he's also a fabulous author. He's written several memoirs. And being, in our early 30s, at that point in the U.S. economy, some of you may remember 2006. Like the economy was great; they were giving out 0% mortgages, all over the place. And so we had gone apple picking in upstate New York, just on a weekend trip, and we drove by this farmhouse, and it had a for sale sign in the yard. And being naive and adventurous on our way back to the city, we're like, we need that farmhouse. And so we cashed in everything that we had saved up to that point in our careers. We're in our early 30s, and took out $1 million mortgage. This is how obnoxious we were. Of course, Martha said, "Oh no, you have to buy that thing."
Gotta
And
smart.
yeah, and so we did, and we were just going to use it on the weekends. We had both come from very rural environments, and we wanted to get back to those kind of rural roots. And also, having lived in the city for over a decade, you know, you would live in your apartment building and you would literally not know one other single person in your apartment building. And so we really had a hunger for community that was not being satisfied. And one weekend, this Sharon Springs is a tiny town, 547 people. So everyone knew that these two gay guys had bought this 200-year-old farmhouse. And one weekend we came up and there was a note in our mailbox from a local farmer, Farmer John, and that's his real name. And he said, I have a herd of 100 goats and I'm losing my farm. Could I please bring my goats to your property to graze? I know you're only there on the weekend, so I won't be disruptive. And we met with him, saw how much he cared for his animals, and we said, sure, that it's completely fine. There's another little cottage on the property. You can live there. When we're not here, you can keep an eye on things. It just worked out perfectly. And we say that was the original act of kindness that started Beekman 1802, because in 2008, when the recession hit, within a month of each other, Martha Stewart being a media company, was severely hit. My whole division was folded. Josh, who was a partner at advertising agency, saw their billings go from $50 million a year to $2 million. And so his position was eliminated. And so we said, okay, we're going to decamp to the farm, because at that point in New York City, you had so many people working in finance, media, whatever industry, who were out of work. You're like, I can't even see when people are going to get jobs again. So many people out of work. And we were very depressed because, as I said, we had both come from very rural backgrounds, had worked really, really hard to get to New York City, reach the pinnacle of our career. And we thought we were company people. We were risk adverse people. We were not born entrepreneurs. And it just, to have everything kind of unceremoniously just ripped away from you, it was very hard on us emotionally. So I'd say probably for about 6 months, we were very depressed, and kind of just mired in the existence of being on the farm. This was the middle of winter. We couldn't afford to heat the farm, and snow would blow in and out of the doors and not melt. And it was just misery. Misery loves company. So we were just mired in it. And we got to spending more time out in the barn with the goats than we did in the house, because it was actually warmer in the house, in the barn, than it was in the house, because you had the heat of the goats and the manure piling up and the hay and the hayloft, and it was just warmer out there. And so at some point we said to ourselves, okay, what are our real assets? And we said, okay, well, we're both hard workers, we're strategic thinkers, we have experience in media, we understand retail, and we have goats. And so we Googled, what can we make with goat milk? And the first thing that popped up was goat milk soap. And so we worked with a neighbor, soap maker Deb, who was making olive oil soaps at the time. And we said, Deb, can you help us create a recipe for soap using goat milk? And she said, yeah, I can do that. And so we came up with this recipe, and we had one product at the time. It was a pure fragrance-free bar of soap. And we said, okay, how are we going to sell this? This was back in 2008. We said, okay, let's learn how to code. And so we learned how to code our website and started selling. Well, I put selling in quotes because no one was selling a lot of stuff on the website in 2008. Started selling it on our website in 2008, and it wasn't going so spectacularly well. And then we said, okay, we're going to have to find another way to sell this soap because we're never going to pay off $1 million mortgage with this. And so I said, okay, where can we take this product where this type of product doesn't normally exist? Because normally with an artisanal product like this, you would be in a farmer's market or maybe a little boutique or something like that. And I said, you know what? This type of thing doesn't really exist in the luxury world. And so I said, I'm just going to go down to New York City and I'm going to knock on all of the luxury department store doors. And I mean, literally, that's what I did. I had a bag, packed it with the soap, and then walked up and down Fifth Avenue in New York City, knocking and like just going in to talk. Can I speak to your manager? Who's your beauty buyer? Can I speak with them? And several of them did actually come out and meet with me, which was nice. But the one who gave me the shot was Henry Bendel, which was this beautiful little department store on Fifth Avenue. And she said, well, you're untested, but I will give you this little 3x3 table on our main floor during the upcoming holiday season. And we'll see how the customer responds to the product. And if they like it, we'll bring it in. And I said, okay. And so when that upcoming holiday season, every day I would get up every morning, like at 4 o'clock in the morning, load up my truck, drive the 3.5 hours down into the city, set up my 3x3 table on, I call it the Avenue of Dreams, and work there until 9 o'clock, get back in the truck, drive the 3.5 hours back up to the farm. I did that whole process every day for 6 weeks. And so many amazing things happened during that 6 weeks period. And I think, and the lesson being that if someone gives you an opportunity, take the opportunity because you don't know what's going to come out of it. But what came out of it was several things. One, the beauty editor from Vanity Fair magazine was just walking through the store doing her Christmas shopping, heard me talk about these bars of soap, and said, what an interesting story. I'm going to write about you in Vanity Fair. And she did. And that became our first big press hit. And someone saw that article who happened to be the buyer from Anthropology. And she came to see me at Henry Bendel, heard me tell the story about the soap. And she's like, this is a perfect Anthropology product. And she said, after this holiday and the New Year, call me and let's talk. So in January, I called her and she said, yeah, can you put together a big kit for us, like a holiday assorted kit of all your soaps? We didn't have assorted soaps at the time. We had one bar of soap. And I said, yes, we can do that. And so we quickly conceptualized what could this gift set look like for Anthropology. And we said, okay, why don't we create a different scent for every month of the year on the farm? And so we said, okay, what's happening in January? What's happening in February? What's happening in March? And we blended essential oils to come up with different fragrances for each bar of soap. And we came up with this kit called A Year in the Country. And she said, we love it. And she put in the order, which amounted to 52,000 bars of soap. And that about killed us because we were so desperate to get this national account that we did not even think about how much money we were making on these bars of soap. And basically, it came out to about 5 cents per bar of soap. And so when it got down to the end of the wire, when we had to make the shipment, which was like in October or someplace, I was still hand wrapping every bar of soap. And I'm one of those
Awesome.
people who's very optimistic and kind of a magical thinker. And we couldn't afford to hire anybody. So I had no option but to just wrap it myself. And Josh, one day we were wrapping at our dining room table. Josh stood in the kitchen and he timed me. And he timed it out and said, it takes you about 7 seconds to wrap each bar of soap. And even if you wrapped bars of soap for every hour for the next 2 weeks, you could not complete this order. And
That's
that's when it hit
magical.
me. Like with that data, I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. And that day, I was taking our online orders because we were still shipping a few orders from our website. I was taking my big US priority mail bag down to the postal clerk who I'd become good friends with at that point. I said, Maria, I don't know what I'm going to do. We have to wrap all these bars of soap and I have to hit this order deadline. And she said, well, I know everybody in town because she's the postal clerk. And she said, I'm going to call anybody I know who's a stay at home mom or a retiree, and we'll just see if we can get anybody to come and help you. And lo and behold, she did. And we had about 30 people who, were sitting at home by themselves and said, oh, yeah, I would come and socialize. It's like a quilting bee, that was
Yeah.
like what. And so for the next 3 weeks, these 30 people did shifts in our home and 24 hours a day. And we got that order done and out the door. And that was when we understood the importance of neighbors and why neighbors became so ingrained into the lore of our company. And we still call all of our customers neighbors. You can see on my pin when you get up close, it says hi neighbor. We don't have a customer services, we have neighbor services. And we tell when we're training our neighbor services team, when you're responding to an email that comes in or a phone call that comes in, think about in your response how I would respond to someone who I'm going to see the next morning when I'm picking up my paper at the end of my driveway. Because you automatically think about that interaction in a different way because it's not something anonymous. It's not an anonymous person you're never going to actually physically see. You're going to see that person,
Yeah.
and they do, and it makes a huge difference.
That's amazing. I have so many questions out of that. I want to amazing stories. I want to hit actually on the last piece though, and the neighbors and how like that story of the post office, like her gathering everyone. That probably wouldn't have happened the day you arrived in Sharon Springs.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
built that neighbor community over time. Can you talk a little bit about how you think about building that over time?
Yeah. Well, we were very conscientious when we moved there, and then particularly when we decided we were going to start a business there, to try to ingratiate ourselves with the community. This community, Schoharie County, which is the home of the farm, is the poorest county in all of New York State. It's very agricultural, very dairy oriented. And so we knew that their impression of city people were, oh, the city people always think they're going to come and tell us how they can do it better. And we knew that that would be the perception. And so we said, okay, how can we deflect that? And so as we were trying to set up the farm, we made an effort to go to all of the local people and ask them what their area expertise was. So if we saw someone who was growing corn, we would knock on their door and say, oh, we want to grow corn, and you seem to know how to grow corn. Can you teach us? And oh, we see you're raising chickens. Can you help us get started with our chickens? And it was such a powerful thing because at the end of the day, everyone, I don't know matter where you are in life, where you are in your career, you want to be appreciated for what your fund of knowledge is, no matter what it is. And so just with that simple gesture of saying, you know what, I think you're an expert at this. Can you teach me? That made them want to help.
Yeah.
And there was, when we first started the company, we said, okay, how can we bring city dollars into our community? Sharon Springs is about 3.5 hours outside the city. So we're like, we really have to do something bigger than just, coming to the farm. And we said, okay, let's organize a harvest festival. And We went to the town, the village board, which is basically the town elders, and we said, "Oh, we want to organize a harvest festival and try to get some city people up here." And they were like, "Oh, well, we tried that, and it didn't really work out." And Josh said, "Well, oh, when did you do it?" Like, "Oh, well, it was 1963." And like still the village board was still a lot of the same members from 1963. And we said, okay. So they weren't really gung-ho about it, but they said, we don't care if you try it. And we said, okay, we'll do it. And so that first year, we were using Facebook. We were probably one of the very first businesses on Facebook. That was when Facebook was making the transition from like a college thing into a,
Business.
a more business oriented thing, or more community oriented thing. And so we talked about it on Facebook, and Josh stood up on the corner. He dressed like William Beekman would have dressed. That was the founder of our farm in 1802, as he would have dressed in 1802. And he rang a bell on the corner, like directing people down into the village. And that first year, we had about 500 people come, which was great. As I said, Sharon Springs was 547 people, so it was about doubling the population in one day. And that it did a couple of things. One, it showed, oh, if Josh is willing to stand up on the corner in leotards, like William Beekman, ringing a bell, driving people in the village, if they're willing to put on this festival by themselves without the help of anybody else, maybe we should pitch in. Maybe they are really committed. And so the next year, everybody, kind of pitched in, and we had started filming the show, The Fabulous Beekman Boys, during that time period. And it had really only started airing a few episodes. So we really didn't know how many people were watching it or anything like that. And so when we started talking about the second annual Harvest Festival, we could tell, okay, people are excited. We drove from the farm into the village that Saturday morning of the second annual Harvest Festival, and the Department of Transportation had wheeled in a sign that was flashing, "Caution Harvest Festival, caution Harvest Festival." And so we drove down the hill into the little village, and it was shoulder to shoulder people. I would say, I think the DOT finally estimated that about 5,000 people came to our little main street
The second year.
the second year. And what was really powerful about that is that we had turned it into a 2-day festival, and we only have 1.5 restaurants in town at the time. And after the first day, everybody had run out of food.
Yeah.
But on the second day of the festival, we saw people walking around with hamburgers and hot dogs. And we said, "Oh, where did you get those hamburgers and hot dogs?" And they're like, "Oh, somebody just sat up on their front porch and they're grilling and they're just giving them away." And so we walked down there, and it was one of our neighbors. And we're like, "What are you doing? You're just giving away this food?" And they said, "Yeah." They said, "I've lived in Sharon Springs for most of my life and have seen it, as most small rural towns do, continue to dwindle and dwindle and dwindle." And they said, you have brought so many people into our town. We don't want to leave a bad impression on them, and we want them to come back again." And so they had driven on Saturday evening, they had driven the 20 miles to a local big grocery store, bought every hot dog, hamburger bun, everything they could find in the store. And they were making them and giving them away because they did not want people to think that we weren't organized.
That
And
story so much.
it's an amazing story. And we did that festival for 10 years up until the pandemic, all community organized, all volunteers. High school kids would empty the trash cans and clean up. And, by the last year that we did it, 20,000 people came into Sharon Springs on that last, and so the businesses in Sharon Springs would make more money during that weekend than they would make the whole rest of the year. And it was still neighbors, the power of neighbors.
I love it. Yeah, the community that you built there, and then the community that you built within Beekman, and how that overlapped between the two, and you brought
Yes.
everyone in. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And I love the story of Josh dressing up, because one of the other, I love the neighbor to neighbor, and then the show not tell was another key, I think, thing from your
We've
book.
always done that.
Yes, which is just, we were talking about earlier too, like so many companies put the culture up on the wall, but maybe don't live it in the day to day. But that example is just amazing.
Yeah, and we thought about this a lot in the writing of this book, because that does happen a lot. And I think a lot of times people who have a business idea and they're starting a company, they're starting it, particularly these days. And I think this is very unique over the past maybe 15 or 20 years in entrepreneurship, is that people start a business with the thought of how am I going to exit this business? And we started our business thinking, how are we going to survive? And that lays the foundation for a very different type of
Yeah.
business. I think that has contributed so much to our success that we never thought about that from the beginning.
Absolutely. You were just living it and doing it every
Correct.
day.
Correct.
I want to talk a little bit about all the risk you took and how you thought about that. All those stories you told, all the way back to writing to Martha Stewart, to putting on the festival, building the kindness shop, so many pieces. Farmer John. How do you think about just starting the business with the goats and seeing opportunity and then taking risk? Can you talk a little bit about how you think about that, and then maybe some examples that did not even go the way that you thought and what you learned from them?
Oh yeah. Well, of course, in 16 years, lots of things have
Lots of
not gone
learnings,
the way.
yes.
Yeah. And as I said, we were very risk adverse people. So
Yeah.
we are not those type of entrepreneurs who are risk takers. But we do look at every opportunity that comes before us. And we're unique in our partnership because I am an overly optimistic thinker and Josh is an overly pessimistic thinker. And so when opportunities come our way, we have a very 360 approach to every opportunity. And I would say there's probably never been an opportunity that we didn't like. We may have had to shape and craft it in a way that would be productive for us. And I also say that in the whole 16 years of starting Beekman, we've never had a failure because a true failure. There may be circumstances where we attempted something that did not work out the exact way that we thought it was going to work out. But we always learned something from it that then somehow moved the company forward. And I think that's so critical when you're thinking about resiliency in a company, because you have to look for the low hanging fruit. Yes, you can take big swings too, those are important, but you have to look for your low hanging fruit. You have to have small successes. And then even in your failures, you have to have a mindset of how am I turning that failure into a success on some level. And even if it's just moving the needle just the slightest little bit,
Yeah.
trying to figure out what is success in that is so important to keep going, to
Yeah.
keep your mind and how to keep going.
I love that. I don't believe in failure either. It's all learning and the growth
Mm.
mindset.
Yeah.
So how do you think about instilling that mindset in employees? I mean, I think with a small team, it can be
Hmm.
maybe a little bit more natural, but now
Hmm.
that you have over 100 people, how do you maintain that?
Um, we talk about this lesson in the book too. We call it frugal innovation. And there actually isn't a surprising amount of academic literature on
Yeah.
frugal engineering and frugal innovation. But any idea in our company always starts with $0. And so, if we are trying to attempt something, particularly when we're launching a new product and we're building the marketing campaign around the new product, we always have our team brainstorm on what they could accomplish if they only had $0. And I will tell you, you get the best ideas when people are really trying to think creatively what I could accomplish with $0. And almost invariably, the best ideas that we ultimately put money behind is something that someone originally generated with thinking they had $0 to spend. And that's really ingrained in every aspect of the culture. And of course, all of our employees, even, number 130, um, most of the time when people are applying to our company, they've either watched the old episodes of Fabulous Being Boys, or they've watched The Amazing Race, or you read up on interviews
Yeah.
and things, so they know what our company is all about, and so they know that we are this type of company that's driven by creativity and frugality. Um, and so we attract that type of employee. So it's easier for us to instill that lesson and easier for them to add to that lesson. And with the idea of kindness, which is also the other important thing to our company and the reason we first
Yeah.
became connected. Um, as we started growing, I would say probably past employee 20, where and we started hiring people, from around the country doing various aspects of the business who were less directly tied to the farm and tied to the tied to Sharon Springs. We're like, okay, how can we make sure that they understand how important kindness and neighborliness is to our company? And so we developed a curriculum that we called the kindness curriculum, which taught people how to be kinder in their interactions with customers and with each other. And that became a standard part of onboarding. And the people who came into the company loved that curriculum so much that we actually turned it into a consumer facing product. And people would come from all over the country to Sharon Springs in groups of 13 to 20 people and have this immersive 1 day kindness curriculum where they would learn all about kindness, how they can incorporate more kindness into their lives, and go see the farm, see the goats, and it was a thing. And then the pandemic hit, and we're like, "Ooh, what are we gonna do now?" Because at that point in the pandemic, you really couldn't see how the pandemic was gonna play out. And, so I was just doing research online and came across KindWorks. You guys were first starting out, and, I thought, "Oh, wow, this is really interesting how they are using AI to, to educate on kindness and encourage kindness in the workforce." And so I reached out, and that's how we got connected. And it's how, we survived the pandemic, and making sure that all new people who could not participate in this in-depth curriculum or come to Sharon Springs could still have that
Get a
idea of
touch of it,
kindness,
yeah.
yeah.
Do you wanna share a little bit about what you mean by kindness in a business setting? And, 'cause I know we talked about it's not just nice, and what does that
Oh, yeah,
actually
well, yeah, there is a
mean?
big difference
Big
between
difference,
nice and
exactly.
kind,
Yeah.
and I would say for us, we try to take a scientific approach to kindness,
Mhm.
which is why we love the things that you do. Our charity partner that I now serve on the board of, kindness.org, really takes a scientific approach to understanding kindness and how it shows up and what are the outcomes from kindness. Um, And for us, culturally, what it means is that we are always going to be honest, and we're always going to truly have an interest in helping people succeed, um, whether that ultimately is with our company or not. And I would say, even today, there's been no one who has come into contact with Beekman as a customer or as an employee or as a member of our online community or our customer community, who has not benefited from their interaction with Beekman, because we truly have everyone's best interest in heart above our own best interest. And I don't know if that comes from how we grew up, um, kind of with very rural environments, very kind of church oriented, golden rule type oriented, or if it's and probably, and then that was reinforced by our experience in starting Beekman 1802. Um, but this idea of how can I help someone else before I help myself is so important to us. And even now, even though we've become this very biotech oriented skincare company, we think of ourselves as a kindness company. And how can we put more kindness out into the world? And never to underplay the importance of self kindness. And for people who have skin conditions or look at the mirror every day and they're picking out things that they don't like about themselves, we think, okay, how can a ritual that we start with our product change their perception of themselves? How can they look at the mirror and say something more kind about themselves every day when they go out before they go out the door, or every night before they go to bed? And that has a really profound ripple effect. And we actually even list kindness as an ingredient on every product that we make, um, because kindness, even beyond what it does to make you feel better, actually changes it changes your body on a cellular level. When you give or receive an act of kindness, you have, that glow you get, that glowy feeling you get, that warmth that you get. Well, that comes from this surge of dopamine and this surge of oxytocin and this reduction in cortisol in your bloodstream. And those things not only just give you that glowy feeling, they are actually changing your body at the level of DNA and
Yeah,
at the level of DNA methylation, and it's changing the microbiome of your skin, which is what we focus on so much at Beekman 1802. So we actually see it as a true ingredient in everything that we do.
science.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
the science. And even on some of our products, particularly our products that focus on more mature skin. So, what most beauty companies would call anti aging, we don't use that terminology. We call it better aging because we want to help people live longer,
Yes.
healthier lives and have longer, healthier skin. And so when you open those products, because that tends to be a portion in people's lives when they really become critical, when they're looking at their reflection in the mirror and they're saying, "Oh, look at this wrinkle, or look at this spot, or look at this skin on my neck." They become super critical of themselves. And so now what we do is in any packaging that is talking about aging, better aging, when you open up that package, there is a loving kindness mantra in every package. And we encourage people to clip that little mantra and attach it somewhere in their bathroom so that every morning when they're looking at the mirror, they're applying their creams and they're doing the routine, yes. But seeing that loving kindness mantra about how they change their mind about kindness and how they put kindness out into the world is equally as important at how they're going to age as any of the products that we're making.
Amazing. That is truly living and showing, and I love that. I want to hit a little bit on your relationship with Ulta too,
Hmm.
because I think that's another great example of the show, don't just tell.
Hmm.
And can you talk a little bit about how that relationship started? And I love the story of the cookies in the middle of the pandemic. So, but I think that's just a fantastic of how do you build that loyalty? Because I think that is why your customers are so loyal for
Yeah,
all these
yeah.
promotions.
Well, by the point that we launched in Ulta, we had already grown really significantly on our .com, and we're already the number one beauty brand on QVC. But still, launching in Ulta is a completely different thing for many reasons. One, it's a multi-million dollar investment because you have to invest in inventory that will support 1,800 stores. You have to invest in your end cap build out. You have to invest in field team that can cover 1,800
Yeah.
stores. It's a huge investment, and we had made this big investment. It's probably like 2 years of planning, and we're set to launch in January that the pandemic hit. Right at the point that all of the stores, they actually shut down completely for a time period, and then it went to, "Oh, we can have, like, 6 people in the store at a time." And at that point of the pandemic, as we were getting ready to launch, again, it was one of those situations where we're like, well, how long is this going to last? Is retail change forever? And we had set aside a budget for myself and Josh, the founders, to go visit stores to, educate people about the product and about the brand and why kindness was important. Well, obviously, we couldn't do that. And we said, okay, what can we do that can still get the brand in front of all the employees? And even though we're not there to talk about kindness, how can we show kindness? And so, obviously, at that point in time, during the pandemic, so many small mom and pop bakeries were also really severely hit by the pandemic. And so we said, okay, how can we help them at the same time that we're going to help ourselves? And so we had our team start going through basically the yellow pages, the online yellow pages, and finding small mom and pop bakeries in every location of the Ulta stores. And we said, we want to contract with you to send several dozen cookies to every Ulta store on the day that our product is going to show up in the store for the first time. And they did. And it was an amazing thing because not only did it give each of them a big order, but it also introduced those small mom and pop bakeries to the employees in the Ulta store. And it's amazing how often you do not know the small businesses in your community. And it really made these incredible bonds between these mom and pop bakeries and these Ulta stores. And it demonstrated, so we, sent this little message to all the stores. Oh, Beekman is delivering the milk, and we've asked this bakery to deliver the cookies and milk. And so now every time we have a big product launch in Ulta, we always deliver the cookies, and it became a thing that we're known for. But again, that's just how kindness can show up when you think about how I'm going to help someone else at the same time.
And how you can think creatively and a little
Hmm.
bit different to just push a
Yeah,
little bit more.
yeah.
I want to make sure we have time for questions. Does anybody want to start with a question? I can keep going otherwise. Yes, please.
You mentioned that you had retreated to the farm in search of community.
Yeah.
And for those of us that live in big cities from the east community, was that a giving up, or do you have any ideas for those of us that really care about community but living in big cities?
Yeah, well, I think it's even easier now because with online, you can easily find online communities in your city and develop those things. We didn't have that capability back then, but I think it's actually quite easy, and I think it's something that we every day that goes by are losing the skills to do. And I think the pandemic really dulled those skills as well. And I think you just have to put yourself out there and do it. And I think, honestly, look at all the people who came out tonight. I mean, this is a community. So after this, when you're out there talking and having your glass of wine, make sure there's not a single person in here that you did not say hello to, because this is a community and that's how you start forming community. And I have this nutrition. We bought a winter place in Orlando, Florida, a couple of years ago because the winters in upstate New York are terrible. And after about a decade there, we're like, we can't do another winter there. Farmer John's still there, and he takes care of the goats, but we're like, we can't do another winter there. And so we bought this house, and this community we're in is kind of built around this lake, and there's like a 3-mile loop around the lake, which I walk every single morning. And I made this conscientious effort. And I said, okay, every person that I pass who's passing me in this direction, I will say hello to every single morning. And it has made the biggest difference in my life. Even someone who tries to practice kindness and is very aware about the power of kindness. Um, it was coming out of my shell to do that, because there are lots of times when you're passing someone, maybe they're younger, or and they're an athlete, or maybe they're older, or maybe they're bigger, whatever. We always find reasons not to connect with people. Like our brain just automatically thinks they're different from me. I'm not going to connect with them. But just by saying, I'm going to say hello to every single person I pass, it takes away the need for your brain to do any judgment, right?
Yep.
And I have made the most valuable connections by doing that. Sometimes that extend beyond the walking trail. And sometimes just every morning they know, oh, here comes Brent and he's going to say hello. And just that moment of being visible, acknowledging that they're visible and that we are sharing this moment in this world, and this
Yep.
5-foot radius as we pass each other, is a really powerful thing. And you can do that yourself, just by saying hello.
And there's also a
Okay.
lot of science on that as well.
Yes, there is.
And
Yeah.
Professor Nick Epley is actually a professor here at Booth. Yes. So if you're familiar with his work of just, we inherently think it's going to be more awkward, but when you say hi to someone, that natural connection happens, and it's for you and it's for them. And actually the benefit for you
It's greater.
is greater.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Well, that's actually one of the things in KindWorks, which is Nicole's company. So for those of you who don't know, this is this system that integrates into your Outlook platform, and it has this little character
Benny.
named Benny, and it sends you these prompts every day to do some act of kindness. And one of the things that I learned when we started using it at Beekman was surprising to me, because as we had grown to 130 people, people all over the country, there are many people that I have never interacted with. And one day Benny sent me this prompt, and it said, and it will tell like it pull another employee's name is to direct you to, and it'll say it said Brent, give a compliment to this person, and I had no idea who this person was, and so I was kind of embarrassed to give this compliment, and but using Benny was my crutch because I was able to say, oh, Benny told me I should reach out and give you a compliment on a job well done, and I thought that was so powerful because here we were 13 years into the history of our company, talking about kindness, investing in research on kindness, and even
It's
I
hard.
had that
Yes.
problem. And it's difficult. Kindness is not easy. Kindness is not an easy thing.
Yes. I tell people when you sit down on an airplane, at least smile and say hi. You don't have to have a full conversation, but
Correct.
it's hard
It's
sometimes.
hard. It's
Yes,
hard to
it's
do.
hard.
Yeah.
Yes, but
Yeah.
yes, please.
So you started out with soap. What
Mhm.
made you go skincare route? I mean, what
Yeah. So we started out with soap, and we once we got into anthropology encouraged us to expand beyond soap. So then we started doing some lotions that we formulated and lip balms, things that they knew that their customer would gravitate toward. And that gave us enough of a customer base that we really started getting feedback from the customers, anecdotal feedback. And what people were saying was that, wow, I have had really problematic skin my entire life. Either I had eczema or psoriasis, or I was prone to breakout or inflammation, or just had super sensitive skin. But your product is really helpful to me. And as a clinician and a scientist, I'm like, that's so interesting that we're getting so many of these. And goat milk has been used for many hundreds of years to treat sensitive skin. People would bathe in goat milk. And so, as a physician, I'd always been very curious about kind of folklore remedies anyway. I always felt like, oh, well, if there's been something that has been used for so long, there must be some bit of truth to it, something. And so I just started investigating uh, what are the properties of goat milk. And at the time that I really started deep diving, and we were successful enough that we could actually invest money into the research, was at the time when research on skin microbiome was really starting to pick up. Of course, people have known about the gut microbiome for many years and probiotics and the power of that internally, but skin microbiome is still a relatively new understanding and technology and field of research. And so we started looking at what were the components of goat milk and how could that be influencing the microbiome of the skin. And the oligosaccharides in goat milk which basically are prebiotics, are very similar to human milk oligosaccharides, the most similar of any other type of milk. And so we look at how those oligosaccharides and now some additional lipids and vitamins are supportive of the microbiome of the skin, and how the microbiome of the skin um, is 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 vital to the health and repair of the skin barrier. So it was just very natural. It came from hearing what our customers were saying and then investigating it.
Which I think you still read every single customer.
I still do. I still
Yes,
do.
which
As my responsibilities in the company, thankfully, have been narrowed and narrowed and narrowed, primarily down to product development. I have a lot more time to read, and I read everything. I'm just a voracious reader, and I get up every morning still very early, and probably read 50 bits of newsletters and journals and things before anybody else gets up. But yeah, I also read every customer service that has come in the day before, um, which is very valuable because you really understand what the customer is saying and asking for, and sometimes find problems before our team does, because now we probably have 10 or 15 neighbor services, and they're all getting bits and pieces of information. But because I am seeing all of them, I can pick up on a trend way before they're picking up on a trend. Yeah. So that's still very, very
amazing.
important to me.
Yeah, please. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Go.
I love your founder story. You are a physician and a
oh,
chief
great.
wellness officer.
Oh, wonderful.
So it's so inspiring when you get to hear a founder's story of building and growing the company with the ethos and the science of science. Like explore Guess to keep us better at the workspace where there is larger cultures you're walking into. So I see it with 13,000 and growing employees, and you're the new person in creating the similar type of movement.
Hmm.
How would your wisdom translate to an existing
Hmm. Well, I would think of the simple things first. I would definitely connect you to Nicole because her system, the AI is really built for scaling on that level. But aside from that, I would start with micro communities. And because you're a healthcare system, you said, or hospitality wellness. Oh, resorts. Okay. 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 Oh, great. Well, I mean, yes, well, as you know, in every situation like that, there are micro communities. There's the front desk community, and there's the F&B community, and there's the housekeeping community. So first, I would work on making sure that those micro communities function, that there is kindness, interactions in between them. And once you've got that set, then start figuring out, okay, how am I going to make that kindness span inter-community and then build out from there. So I would task your managers in each of those micro communities to work on that. Okay, great. Great. Absolutely.
Excellent. Yes, please.
So I'm about to become the person in this country.
Oh, wonderful.
I'm a business consultant.
Hmm.
Well.
Don't
Yeah, I know.
the organization change. And we work predominantly with retail and wholesale organizations.
Mhm.
And we work with a lot of organizations that are moving from that entrepreneurial, this is how we got here, this is up to get us, what makes us great, to they can't keep repeating that pattern because
Mhm.
they will fail.
Hmm.
And that step is huge. And I'm curious how you did it as you moved from 50 to 50 to 100 and pulling away from the business. That's the other thing, is we work with a lot of founders that are like,
Hmm.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so the first question is, how do we make sure that the culture it can scale? Okay. Um, okay. So the first question with the scalability of kindness, that really goes back to thinking, how can we make sure that every new employee who comes into the company understands why that is so important to us? And that's why we developed that curriculum. And it wasn't just the two of us developing the curriculum. We hired a person who had a master's in education to help us actually develop this curriculum. So we're really thinking ahead of time on how we're going to make sure that this happens. And so whatever those companies have decided is the critical element of their company, make sure that they have really put the stake in the ground for that in a very formal way. Because as Nicole said, so often the formality is
Put it on the wall.
on the wall, but
Yeah.
that's right.
Yes.
But that's not it. That's not truly it. So I would make sure that that happens. And then in terms of stepping back from the company, we from the very beginning, and part of this comes from my experience at Martha Stewart, because I had seen what happens to a company that is so focused and so dependent on a singular personality. And so from the very beginning, we were trying to develop a company that was not dependent upon us. It became more dependent on us than we wanted it to, just because of the nature of TV retail and whatnot, and media. But we were always trying to create a company that could exist without us. And also, I think it's very important, going back to what I said from the beginning, we weren't thinking about an exit at the beginning, but so many entrepreneurs now are. And I think if you're coming into a company, and if you're consulting a company, particularly at the beginning, earlier stages of the company, start having the founder question that now. Like, how am I going to set this company up for success when I'm not here? Um, I think that's such a critical thing to do. And we've always thought about, again, going back to kindness, how do we develop employees? And even when we have brought in CEOs and CMOs, we don't bring, there's no perfect candidate. So we bring them in and saying, okay, how is this person not only going to take and understand what we have built, but how are they going to then expand on that in their unique way? And so I would start having your founders think about that very early on before they get to that point. And there'll be multiple iterations of that. But just having them start considering that and really pressing them on it. Don't just throw the idea out there, really press them on it.
So my follow-up is,
Oh, yeah.
what's your favorite?
Oh, my favorite product? Oh, wow.
So you have dry and warm skin.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you my routine, which is I use our milk froth facial cleanser. Cleansing is still, of all the products we make, of any skincare product, the way you cleanse your skin is the most important part of your routine, because most cleansers will disturb the microbiome of the skin just by nature of the surfactant. And once you disturb the microbiome of the skin, you're going to naturally start an inflammatory process, which is going to lead to premature aging and a host of other issues on the surface of the skin. So the way you cleanse your skin is very, very important. And so I would say, if you don't buy any other Beekman product, buy the cleanser, because that's going to make the biggest difference in your skin. So I use that. And then we have our, because I'm over 50, our better aging cream. I use. We extract the exosomes from goat milk and use it to deliver this really powerful polypeptide. I know this I love the science. So sorry. Oh, you do? Okay, so you're fine. Not everybody is, though, so I won't bore them with the details, but that's my personal routine. Yeah.
You're a great ad for all those. So yes. Well, why don't we, if there's no other questions, we'll take more out here. Brent, this has been so fun.
Thank you.
This
That
has
went
been
by
an
very
amazing
quickly.
conversation. Yes. Brent will be here to sign books, take more questions. Thank you all for joining us. Let's continue the conversation. There's food, there's snacks. Probably everyone's a little hungry as well.
Yeah.
So
Thank you, everybody.
thank you.